The world knows the 1920s as the Roaring Twenties. But if someone asks where this roar was heard the loudest, there is only one answer: New York City. This was not just a city. It was a movement. It was an experiment. Skyscrapers were rising toward the sky. The sound of jazz echoed in the streets. The city did not sleep at night, and every person felt that the future belonged to them. In this era, New York showed the world that a city is not just a place to live, but a reflection of human thinking, human speed, and human dreams. In 1918, World War I came to an end. Europe had been destroyed. Cities had been reduced to ashes. Millions of young lives had been lost. After this chaos, the world needed hope, escape, a new beginning. And America, especially New York, filled this gap. America had come out of the war relatively safe. Its factories were running, its money was growing, and its confidence was sky high. At that time, New York was becoming the replacement of the old world. When you look at New York in the Roaring Twenties, the first thing you notice is skyscrapers. Before the 1920s, cities were mostly close to the ground. Height was limited. This was the era when New York began to think upward. Every new building was not just a structure of concrete and steel, but a symbol of America's confidence, its economic power, and its dreams for the future. By the 1920s, Manhattan had become a giant construction site. Cranes could be seen everywhere. The sound of hammers filled the air, and almost every day a new tower was added to the skyline. Every new skyscraper was sending a message: we are not going to stop. Buildings like the Chrysler Building and the Empire State Building proved that New York was not just growing, it was challenging the sky. There was also a practical reason behind these skyscrapers. Land had become expensive, the population was growing, and the city had no choice but to expand upward. But the real reason was not just necessity. The real reason was a show of power. Skyscrapers did not mean just height. They meant more offices, more jobs, more business, and more people arriving in the city with their dreams. When people walked on the streets and looked up, they felt that if these buildings could touch the sky, then maybe their dreams could too. The New York of the Roaring Twenties was becoming a vertical city, where every floor carried hope, behind every window there was ambition, and every steel beam was supporting the future. The rise of skyscrapers in the Roaring Twenties was not a fashion or a coincidence. Behind it were clear economic, technological, and urban reasons. The first major factor was the maturity of steel frame technology and elevators. Before this, building such tall structures was not practically possible. But after the 1910s, engineering reached a point where 40, 50, and even 60-story buildings became safe and usable. The second factor was Manhattan's limited land and rapidly growing population. New York had become America's business and immigration hub. People, companies, banks, and newspapers all wanted offices in Manhattan. Land could not expand outward, so the city began to grow upward. The third and most powerful factor was corporate competition. In the 1920s, every big company wanted its building to be the tallest, the most modern, and the most dominant in the skyline. Because of this, skyscrapers were no longer just office buildings. They became status symbols. The planning of the Chrysler Building and later the Empire State Building was in reality the result of this same height race. Another important reason was the economic boom. After the First World War, America had capital, investors, and strong market confidence. That is why such massive projects became possible. For urban planners, skyscrapers meant more people and more offices on the same land, more tax revenue, and greater global importance for the city. In this way, the skyscrapers of the 1920s were not just buildings, they were the physical result of New York's economic system, technology, and power structure. The 1920s were the era of the Jazz Age, when music taught New York how to live. Born from African-American culture, jazz left the streets of New Orleans, reached the clubs of Harlem, and became the true sound of the city. The New York City of the 1920s was a city that lived in rhythm and melody. Jazz became the heartbeat of every street, bar, and cafe. People gathered on street corners to listen to improvisations on trumpet, saxophone, and piano. Children and workers took short breaks from their routines to dance for a while and dropped coins into the hands of musicians. Subways and train stations also became temporary stages where commuters felt rhythm and energy added to their daily routines. In cafes and small bars, people sat at tables sharing laughter, flirting, and gossip with piano and live bands in the background. Meanwhile, during Prohibition, in secret speakeasies, flappers and young people danced all night, and the city's nightlife stayed alive with the clinking of glasses and jazzy beats. In homes, jazz records played on gramophones and phonographs, and families and friends enjoyed the music in informal gatherings, clapping and swaying to the rhythm. In venues like Harlem's Cotton Club and the Savoy Ballroom, music and dance became a part of a cultural revolution where racial and class boundaries temporarily dissolved. In the streets, skyscrapers, and alleys of New York, there was a unique energy. Every note and every beat brightened people's days and offered a temporary escape and a moment of joy in the city's fast-paced life. Jazz did not only entertain New Yorkers, it gave them a feeling of freedom, creativity, and celebration, an experience that even today brings the memory of the old days of the 1920s back to their hearts.